I hear about Christine falling in love and getting married and stuff like this, and I'm like going, well, good on Christine. Is he okay with that? Yes.
No, I've never had a shot at a bar.
What if all of it, everything you thought about this family after observing them for more than a decade, never existed at all? What if the love, the harmony, the spiritual center, was all just an expertly staged show? No, I've never had a drink at a bar, not once. Today, we're destroying the last curtain of Sister Wives' lies. From Kody's unobtrusive exit plan to the psychological harm he did to his kids. This is the uncensored, bare truth TLC doesn't want you to know. We receive a lot of fantastic feedback, largely due to her cooking. I really wish you knew just how much The words came smoothly off Kody's lips, with the forced casualness of one attempting to be relaxed while weighing each sentence. It wasn't nostalgic. It wasn't genuine. It was evasive, a flight in the guise of a fantasy. On the surface, it read as a joke. Something one would tell when they're cornered. But for Kody, this wasn't a joke, it was a signal. A fissure in the act. A change, subtle but undeniable, in his whole demeanor. He wasn't fantasizing about the next big thing, or drinking coffee in Paris. He was speaking in terms of code of exiting from the ruins of prior decisions. Busted finances, wrecked relationships, kids who no longer respond to his messages, and most of all, from the slow death of the very franchise that once anointed him as king of prime time. Coyote Pass, which had been a dream, now tasted like a burden. The loans, broken promises, constant pretending, it all rang out as failure. Each square foot whispered a variation of what didn't happen. And now Kody wasn't merely talking about leaving land behind. He was tiptoeing away from the whole story. Once the self-appointed hero, he now seemed like a man orchestrating his own silent vanishing act. And the timing wasn't accidental. TLC was scaling back. The family dynamics had dwindled down to a single tenuous thread: him and Robyn. His purpose was disintegrating. The implosions had already occurred. The drama had been documented. So what was left to be recorded? What remained to be sold? Call up the European fantasy, not a dream, but a distraction. An opportunity to do it all over again before someone else had scripted it for him. If Kody could leave first, perhaps he wouldn't be required to tell anyone what he was actually running from. Aurora's breathing quickens, her hands tremble, her voice cracks, and the cameras keep rolling. This isn't nervousness, it's naked exposure. She has 4 to 5 panic attacks a week, each one recorded and edited for people to watch. What should be an intensely intimate crisis is made into entertainment. Her suffering isn't guarded, it's framed. This little girl, in mid-dissolution, isn't someone's kid anymore. She's a plot device now. Her agony, cut into chunks, is used to power the show's next emotional beat. Sympathy doesn't stop the camera. Informed consent doesn't have any authority. The narrative conforms, zeroes in on her disintegration. Aurora's collapse becomes the center ring of a reality circus. Not because the family desires to heal, but because producers require drama. And so her fear becomes spectacle. Her identity dissolves, no longer a teenager managing her feelings, but a metaphor for consequences the adults would rather deny. And yet, she arrives. In this household, loyalty is demanded. Silence is survival. Speak out, and you're accused of betrayal. Cry on camera, and you're too emotional. Break down entirely, and you're labeled unstable. But her panic remains useful. It ensures screen time. Behind the visible distress is a deeper betrayal, one that doesn't simmers. A child, overwhelmed to the point of physical revolt, remains in the spotlight. Her breakdown is rehearsed only in that it's never allowed to rest. There's no retreat, no place for sanctuary, just the constant obligation to appear functional, while drowning in chaos. And it isn't pressure from outsiders, it's pressure from within, from the very people who are supposed to safeguard her. Because in this family, calm isn't something that's promised, it's something that's indulged. Aurora's collapse is never treated as the crisis it is. It's heard as ambient sound, but as long as the red light on the camera continues to flash, her suffering is useful. The emphasis on the show has changed. Marriage is no longer the focal point, it's the children now. One by one, the original marriages fell apart. With them, the emotional center of the family fell apart too. But Kody still had to remain on camera. He had to have purpose. So the camera shifted to the children. Not because their lives were important, but because they could still be used. to attract viewers. With each wife that departed Janelle Christine, even Mara Kody lost face. But the kids, they couldn't simply walk away, not easily, not without repercussions. Aurora and Brianna now bore a burden significantly greater than their age. They became evidence. Visual evidence that a family still existed, even if barely. They were transformed from daughters to symbols. Emotional labor wasn't a decision, it was a requirement. Smile. Be supportive. Sit in group scenes. Don't interrupt. Their worth came not from their voices, but from their silence. Brianna had learned early: fit in. Don't complain. Aurora, already visibly disintegrating, still was to perform. Both of them did not have the privilege of open expression. The show did not need their truths, it needed their compliance, and thus they became centers of every scene that still counted. Kody and Robyn, meanwhile, hovered above everything, engaged, uninvolved, yet somehow still controlling the emotional tone. Through their children, they contributed little to it, but demanded everything: loyalty, recognition, constant involvement, and when tension mounted, they didn't back away, they leaned forward. Because each unpaid invoice, each tired plot, each disaffected viewer, a crisis demanding more feeling effort. From the kids. Christine, on the other hand, was contented, and that happiness put Kody into a tailspin. It began slowly, a gentle, lingering smile, a self-assurance that didn't have to be justified. And then there was David, firm, warm, emotionally connected. While Kody attempted to be the focal point, Christine simply existed. And that's what made her threatening. Not because she moved on, but because she did so well with each step forward Christine made. Kody fell further into reaction. When she and David became engaged, his reaction wasn't considered, it was defensive. Robyn also had a new ring suddenly. When Christine and David went to Moab, exploring the Red Rocks, Kody planned a muddy day at Coyote Pass, more parody than rivalry. The efforts were humiliating. But still, he persisted. He used chainsaws, chopped trees, looked for a vista that could compete with Christine's. But you can't produce what lacks within. Christine's decisions were from genuine development, Kody's from desperation. When Christine and David transported some of the kids abroad, Kody's response was to discuss a relocation to Europe, another delusion, another stolen plot. He wasn't creating a future, he was attempting to replicate hers. The truth. Christine didn't shatter his heart. David shattered his ego. That's the wound Kody continues to nurse. Because no matter how many trees he knocks down, rings he flashes, or trips he fakes to take, he still hasn't discovered what Christine did. And then there's Robyn. She didn't merely become a part of the Brown family, she changed it altogether. Day one, the dynamic had shifted. Initially, it seemed like nervousness, fumbling smiles, overcompensating apologies. But there was something far more deliberate going on. Something more sinister. Robyn wasn't adjusting, she was molding the family, ever so carefully. With every single word spoken and every momentary silence kept. The remarks started innocently. Should I leave so you can lie on the bed together? It was playful sounding, but the weight of the ensuing silence, heavy. It wasn't a joke. It was a line drawn in soft, manipulative ink. She kept inserting herself into places that were not hers. Where boundaries were respected, Robyn told stories of intimacy. Where the atmosphere was strained, she made it all about her. Her pregnancy became not just personal, it was political, a not-so-subtle message to the other wives. I still command his attention. Where other people protected their privacies, Robyn broadcast her on, particularly in public places. Her words did not create connection, they created hierarchy. She didn't claim power, she suggested it. With body language, timing, tears, she was the desired one, the legal one, the center. But the double standards stacked up. She brought in debt, never worked, had a nanny while the other wives jostled, babies, jobs, and emotional labor. It wasn't hypocrisy, was entitlement, masquerading as sympathy. She acted the victim but kept control. She didn't make actual sacrifices, but demanded absolute devotion. While others bent and broke, Robyn wasn't touched yet, still told others how they were meant to survive the meltdown. She never yelled for dominance. She took it subtly, quietly, measured, calculated, until one day, the family glanced around and no longer knew themselves. And by then, it was too late to notice that Robyn hadn't simply been a victim of the collapse, she had been building it all along. Mary sat across from the attorney, her voice shaking slightly, her statements sounding practiced but fragile. I've been thinking about this for 5 years, she said. but nothing in her tone reflected certainty. It didn't sound like resolution, it felt like defeat. The divorce wasn't born from strength. It carried the weight of confusion, presented as loyalty, disguised as a solution. Yet deeply rooted in emotional manipulation. Even though Kody was not in the room, his presence dominated the whole discussion. Whenever Mary paused, it was as if she was silently asking, "Is this what you want? Is this enough for you to remain?" Contradictions mounted quickly. She insisted the divorce would make no difference, but almost immediately conceded that it would. She rationalized it as a legal nicety so Robyn's children could be adopted. But even that rationale collapsed under interrogation. "I just assumed this was best," she barely whispered. Assumed. After allegedly deliberating on it for 5 years, all she could provide was assumption. The attorney didn't seem comforted. She seemed anxious. And it was obvious to everyone, perhaps not to Mary, that this wasn't her decision. Then Kody had a word. A curt "thank you," said as if he were checking off a to-do item. His detached distance was evident. This wasn't a joint sacrifice. It was an exit strategy. He'd checked out emotionally a long time ago, before the pen ever touched the paper. This divorce was not about was about legitimacy. It was Kody making way for Robyn to get first position legally and emotionally. And Mary clung to a dying hope she couldn't even articulate, hoped that perhaps this would get her way back in. Instead, it was the last door slammed shut in her face. Then, afterward, it was revealed that Robyn had been the one constantly bringing up the legal divorce. It hadn't been on the spur of the moment. It had been calculated, and Mary, forever eager to prove her loyalty, marched right into the trap, not with strength, but with unfailing allegiance. She thought she was sacrificing for the family. What she gave them instead was license to erase her. Then there was a moment that, superficially, should have been full of joy, the children being informed that they were being adopted. But rather than rejoicing, the room went quiet and somber. Their faces did not light up. They paralyzed themselves. Some blank stared, others cast their eyes downward. There was no confusion. There was stony desolation. This was not a performance of belonging. It was abandonment, served with a signature. A gesture offering itself as love, but lacking emotion or intelligibility. A name change that shut them out and entombed their voices. One day, when they see that clip again, they will see the scene did not portray happiness. It recorded compliance, and they'll be asked questions nobody wants to respond to. Why didn't he fight for us? Why didn't he inquire about what we desired? Why were we redefined on paper without being heard? It will be told to them for now that it was love. One day they will realize it was convenience. This wasn't about what the children needed. It was about what Robyn and Kody needed to present a clean slate, a tidy legal family, a narrative scrubbed of past mistakes and messy relationships. But real families aren't like that. They're layered, complicated, held together by more than signatures. At that point, all of it had come down to paperwork and manipulated responses. What was left after that was worse. The silence. Robyn's ex, so absent from the public eye, said nothing. Kody provided no genuine introspection. The children weren't even invited to work through it. It was over before it ever had a chance to start. The adoption scenario was the finishing touch to a portrait painted to shield the grown-up snot, the kids, to disguise what had been stolen without warning. Then Solomon appeared, born in the midst of disruption. The Browns had merely ripped their roots up and relocated to Las Vegas. All crammed into a short-term rental, shaken by the disruption. There was no stability, no regular income, no long-term housing arrangement, no health insurance. The children were confused. The wives were exhausted. And then, in the midst of the chaos, Robyn and Kody delivered the bombshell. They were having a baby. It didn't register as an excited shock. It was like a distraction, a means of diverting attention from the collapse, of providing the audience and themselves something to obsess over instead. But where beginnings don't obfuscate consequences. The family was already stretched to its breaking point, 13 children, no cushion of money, adults scrambling for marginal work or none at all. The TLC checks were novel, flaky, and not even close to enough to guarantee their future. And still, they pushed forward. Another baby, another weight, another sign that they preferred expansion over stabilization. The older children felt it hardest. They saw their parents value looks over stability, saw resources disappear while their needs were neglected. Year by year, some of them have quietly complained about the hunger, the lack of insurance, the constant anxiety. And then they looked, as Robyn hired a nanny not to help a working mom, but to simplify the life of a woman who did not work outside the home. Meanwhile, the other wives brought up their children mostly by themselves, while also scrambling to keep the house from sinking. The disparity was clear and deliberate. It was baked into every decision. Solomon's birth announcement wasn't another plot twist. It unveiled the deep crack underneath the family's facade. The show attempted to show it as a celebratory moment, but it really was a turning point, emphasizing that the financial and emotional weights were never evenly placed. And the choice to add a second child to that disarray, it wasn't a blessing, it was a message. That photo was more important than responsibility. That being able to present family growth was more important than guarding the ones already unraveling. Kody, year after year, seemed to excel in turmoil, not because he solved it, but because he managed it. His leadership flourished in disorder. Too many voices, too many moving pieces, just enough tension to keep him at the center. He didn't guide, he managed. Not for unity but for authority. Decisions weren't made through conversation. They were dictated, dressed up as discussions. "I'm putting together a presentation for my wives," he once said, as if pitching a corporate merger, not shaping a family life. And when someone pushed back, he didn't listen. He steamrolled. Christine had been expressing her unease with the one-house plan for years, but because she didn't fit into his picture, he dismissed them as emotional detritus. Only when she said no firmly and forever did he acknowledge the resistance. By then, it was too late. Kody's leadership hadn't failed. It had never been. The one-house plan had never been about togetherness. It had been about control. He envisioned them all living together in one house, where he could be the gatekeeper of every choice, every word, every minute. What he referred to as unity, the others perceived as surveillance. Now that the other wives are gone, and no further opposition remains, Kody drifts. There is no disorder to manage. No strife to anchor himself in. Just Robyn who never challenges him, and in the silence, the truth is revealed. He was not a leader, he was a conductor with no orchestra. And now that there is no sound remaining, no friction to smooth over, there is no place left for him to be. He sits in a house that rings with emptiness, clinging to power that no one is even attempting to usurp from him. Kody once proclaimed love should be multiplied, not divided. Now, that sounds like a punchline. For in the end, it wasn't love he multiplied, it was control, dysfunction, denial. Today, he stands before the camera and proclaims he never did love his previous wives. And poof, years of common life are wiped away. The ideal of plural marriage, once cast as divine, sacred, intentional, now exposed as empty. If he never loved them, then what was the point? Why did they bend and stretch and suffer for a dream that was never based in reality? Christine, Janelle, Mary, they weren't perfect, but they were present. They believed, they tried. They built a life out of common faith, only to find the man at the center of it wasn't building anything. He was pretending. And when things got tough, Kody didn't look back. He rewrote the story, turned their lines into betrayals, painted their exits as rebellion. Only Robyn is left now. In his retelling, she's the only one who ever existed. But even that story is shaky. Kody no longer has a family. He has an institution supported by production calendars and checks. The show may go on, but the narrative has imploded. The network refers to it as evolution, or growth, or change. But the reality is not so complicated, it's collapse. What was marketed as an experimental progressive family has disintegrated into a public meltdown. The wives experienced it, the children sensed it, and the audience, they saw it fall apart before their eyes. Kody's grief isn't about love lost, it's about control lost. He wasn't heartbroken, he was naked. The man who used to define himself as how many wives he could count now has only one left, and even she resembles a ghost. This was not a failed relationship, it was the failure of a myth. And now, where a family once was, we're left with one lingering question resonating through the quiet. Was any of it ever real? When the cameras shut off, when the crew leaves, when the final episode ends, what's left isn't love, it's fallout. If this collapse hit something within you, if you think these stories need to be told without apologies, do one thing. Like this video, share it, and subscribe. This is your place for truth, deep dives, and all the things TLC will not tell you, right here on TLC Sister Show.